to the art of action figures. On this episode, we are talking about the Bandai Tamashii Nations SH Figuarts 2B from NieR Automata. And in the very, very fine print, version 1.1a, which is the anime series that is based on the NieR Automata video game. NieR Automata has the unusual distinction of favorite video game that I've never played. In my mind, it at least kind of takes as a starting point a cross between The Legend of Zelda and Evangelion, and that puts it pretty squarely in the sort of Japanese melancholic sci-fi fantasy subgenre, which is a subgenre that I really do enjoy, but only in very small doses. And so that's why I haven't played the game, but I do really enjoy the soundtrack, the art. 2B has a very cool design and is, for me, going to be part of my video game icons collection. And so I'll pull out some of those figures later for some comparisons. The premise is 2B and 9S are androids who, on behalf of humans, are fighting robots who are fighting on behalf of aliens. I think I got that right. I'm not going to spoil anything about the game. My read on the character is she's kind of by the book, cold, and detached, which of course is a favorite trope of sad anime. I think let's start going over the packaging, then we'll do the unboxing, go over accessories, articulation, and then we'll close up with some sort of overall impressions. The box uses a very nice black and white motif, which goes very nicely with the character's design palette. On the front, we see 2B posed holding her hand over her chest, also low-key showing off her gloves. And in the bottom right, we have Bandai and Tamashii Nations logos, as well as the holographic Tamashii Nations quality sticker, which authenticates this Tamashii Nations product. Top right says Bandai Namco. Lower left, SH Figuarts, designed by Tamashii Nations in Japan, Bandai Spirits made in China. NieR Automata version 1.1a, 2B, written in brackets, deploys another one of my favorite tropes, which is randomly capitalizing letters in names, long strings of decimal numbers, and names for characters that aren't names. Spinning around to the left side, we have some information about SH Figuarts, the logo again, the name of the character 2B, and then there's this very cool computer triangle pattern. On the right side, battle-ready pose with her support drone Pod 42, which is also included here. On the bottom, again, just the name of the character and a photo of her dashing in a sword attack. And then spinning around to the back. And then around the back, we have several product photos. This one is repeated from the side. This one is with 9S, who I think is coming out next month. Sort of a relaxed sword pose here. The dashing sword pose. Two of her alternate faces, opened eyes with no mask, and then closed eyes with no mask. Ages 15 and up. Warning, choking hazard, small parts. Not for children under 3. Okay, let's go ahead and unbox the figure. I've got my trusty hobby knife here, which I've used to slice the tape on the right-hand side. I'm going to slip the blade just under the flap here, push toward the back of the box, and pop. And pop the other end. There we go, got a nice clean flap. This is older style Figuarts box, I guess, with no color printed on the inside. Instead, there is this sort of gray back panel insert. think there will probably be an instruction booklet. Let's take a quick look at that. It looks pretty straightforward. Warning sharp, pointing to her sleeves. The hands C and D are the ones that hold the sword, which is also sharp and has paint that may rub off. So that's the quick overview of the instruction booklet. Here is your gray color back insert. It's kind of glossy. And taking a look at the tray, we have the figure 2B and her 5 total face expressions. The default face is sort of a neutral expression with her mask. Then she has a shouting, attacking face, a sad to neutral expression with opened eyes and no mask, a closed eyes, sleeping or feeling very deeply in some kind of way expression, and then shouting with the mask. She has a pair of fists, a pair of sword holding hands, a pair of open hands, and then a single flat left hand. She also comes with her pod 42, which is sort of her support drone, combat support drone stand, which holds up pod. And then, of course, she comes with her sword. All of the weapons have very dramatic sounding names. This one is called Virtuous Contract. And it has a poem to go along with it, so you can look that up if you are so inclined. But it appears to have some really lovely paint applications, which we'll take a closer look at once we get the figure out. But there's one more thing to cover, and that is around the back. There is a base for the display stand, as well as the articulated arm with a waist clip, and that is everything. Okay. Let's go ahead and take her out. I'm going to lay the tray flat so the accessories don't all fall. Just pop it open and set the lid aside. Now, raising the figure out of the box. Just getting a quick kind of overview impression, and then we'll go over everything in a lot more detail. I like to take my reviews nice and slow and take time to really enjoy the figures. Yeah, so far everything feels nice and smooth. I believe the concept for this character was cosplay bait, but it is a very intricate example of sort of Parisian high fashion, I guess. There's something almost like Swan Lake, Black Swan, and yeah, I think so far my impression is the figure feels really solid. She does have a peg hole at the back for attaching the display stand, so we'll take a look at how that works. I think that will be really cool for some of those like lunging sword poses. Oh, that's wonderful. That's very cool. She has a ball joint in the bottom of her sleeve there, and it helps her to raise her arms despite her shoulder poofs. That's very cool. I certainly would love to know what happened in the future for this to be a combat android, but I'll allow it. Demonstrate how the display stand works. It has 3 holes where you can peg either of the attachable arms. 2 out of the 3 have these little plugs inserted. Take the larger peg and you can peg it into the stand. Let's go ahead and put this articulated arm in the center, and then we'll put this post at the side and spin it around. Use the waist clip here for a second, and I love that they have included this because the design for this character stipulates she wear these, which are the reason she has been leaning against the back of my display. These are very thin at the base, very tall, high heels. So you can see how the waist clip works. When you're putting Pod onto his post, be very, very careful. Like I mentioned, his plastic is pretty hard and delicate, especially around his fingers and these arms. And here are 2B and Pod. Reminds me of Odile, who is the black swan in the ballet Swan Lake. And there is, definitely some like Parisian high fashion ballet kind of quality to it, with the sort of flared out, almost tutu, these really delicate textures and materials. The tights are a bit of an exaggeration beyond what you would see in ballet, but since she sort of reminds me of a ballet design, I figured let's try some ballet poses. I'm going to swap her fists, and in doing so point out very thin wrists and therefore very, very small, thin wrist pegs. So it is a little bit of a concern how small these are. But so far, so good, I guess. And I'm going to give her her open hands. Go ahead and swap the face for her closed eyes expression. To do so, pop the bangs. The face, and you can simply put the replacement face. Looks rather frightening until you add the front hair back on. There we go. Really liking her shoulder articulation thus far. Without the waist clip now, I'm going to use this peg hole on her back to just plug this here. Hopefully. There we go. That goes on fairly easily, and this way I can get her really leaning here, like she's in motion. And I think this looks a lot cleaner without the waist clip, so I'll probably use that more often than not when I can make it work. And it works really well since her costume is black, because that just so happens to also be the color of the shadow that forms inside the peg hole. And so under just, it's actually kind of hard to capture it on camera So unless you have it like really directly lit, it can be hard to spot, which is good. And so that's a pretty smart design choice, I think. I just noticed her little waist, her little belt can swivel around here. So yeah, that works really nicely. Let's go ahead and spin around on this pose one more time. I'm noticing a couple strategic cuts on her skirt. There's one here, and this is a very nice soft material. To equip her sword, I'm going to replace the open hands with sword grip hand. Again, be very careful with those wrists, they're very small. And here we have her very exquisite sword. Lovely silver blade with this dark gray inlay there. Greenish gray wrap around above the hilt. The hilt and the pommel are this really beautiful, like metallic ice blue. And then the handle, of course, has this sort of diamond wrap. To place it in her hand is a bit of a trick because her hands are very small. I was warned by the instructions this paint might rub off. And so to do it, I'm going to spread her fingers as carefully and gently as I can. Sort of slide it in on its side between the fingers and the thumbs, and then just gently rotate it. And if I want to reposition it, I'm going to try to just lift up on the fingers and prevent as much as I can, prevent the paint from rubbing off. I'm not sure which is the paint. It looks like probably the white is paint and the black is the base plastic color. It's really nice how they've hidden the seam for her hair right below the hairband, and then with this little sort of partition on each side. It looks very good. Yeah, really great shoulder joints. This is kind of a like 3.0 butterfly joint, and I'll talk about what that means in a moment. But let's go ahead and get her doing some kind of sword slash. Had a suspicion based on just how cool this character looks in motion in the game and the design, that it was going to be one of those figures that just looks so good it kind of poses itself. And so far I am really liking it, and hopefully with like a really high degree of Figuarts articulation, and I am really pleased on both accounts so far. Again, if you're looking for tips for posing this figure, check out Ballet. I often use Ballet as a reference for action figure poses, figure drawing poses. Swan Lake is a classical ballet, so if you look up references, you'll find a lot of like clean lines, tutus, women dancing on point. Not sure I like that one. Let's see. And the nice thing about including a display stand is you not only can lift the character off the ground, but you can balance them in a pose they otherwise wouldn't be able to balance in, and it can really help with conveying a sense of motion. And here is 2B in more of an action pose. And the nice thing with the peg in her back, it does create a very clean look with very minimal kind of plastic from the stand showing up, depending on how you position everything. You can kind of hide bits and pieces behind the figure if you're really looking to not see the stand at all. You can get pretty close. There we go. Now we're looking pretty good. Yeah, I like that. All right, let's try some of the other accessories now. One thing to note is this figure does come with Virtuous Contract, but not the second version with the like extended blade. I don't know what the name of that one is. I think it's Virtuous something, but and here again with the help of the display stand, it's your battle ready anime girl pose with the knees pointing together. I'm not sure why that's a thing, but I think it is a thing. And you can see she does have her white undergarment under there. Since it is a thing you can do in the game, her skirt is some sort of weapon, which when deployed obviously leaves her without the skirt. And for anybody who's wondering, it's pretty much as accurate as you would like under there. However, we're going to keep this brief, but the skirt is not really designed to be removed. There is no replacement midsection there. You can, of course, pop it off and remove it, but leaves quite a gap, which you might be able to work around, but obviously if you look right at it, something is amiss. There we go. I think that's going to hold at least for the moment. Okay. And there you can see her shouting unmasked face. Let's go ahead and get her default setup back on, and we'll go over all of the little details of her outfit. bringing her in for close-ups, you can see the stitching on her mask. The little mole in the lower left corner of her mouth is painted on each of the faces. She has some very faint pinkish sort of lipstick, I guess. Her collar has a little bit of a very lowercase V. Moving down to her shirt, I'm not really sure what you call this type of pattern. But kind of has a gothic quality, I guess. And here we can see more really nice detail on the back of 2B's shirt that I almost forgot to show. And then down the side is this seam where the shirt is fastened, and you can see some little, I don't know, clips or something on there. Her shoulder poofs and these sort of sleeve bracelets, elbow bracelets. I don't know what you call this type of clothing, but they are pretty hard plastic. That's why they warn you they're sharp, and that's because they have this really fine like feather texture, and that's another part of this costume that really makes me think of Swan Lake. And then the lower arms are covered in these white gloves, which kind of transition to black with this really delicate overlay and maybe some white buttons or something. And then the inside of the gloves is black, again with a really, really delicate pattern painted in. And of course this is repeated on all of the hands, which is just so nice. She has this tie for her belt, which can rotate. And then her skirt's in 2 pieces. And then the front has this additional cut that's part of the design, but then on top of that, there are cuts where the 2 pieces of skirt separate, and has this almost like etched silver pattern that goes all the way around. She does have her white underwear underneath the skirt. Then moving down her thighs, she has these stockings which have this really cool quality where the thigh kind of pinches in around the elastic of the stockings. It's a very nice sculpting trick to convey softness in a sculpt made of a hard material. The paint on the stockings is a little bit messy, but not too noticeable from a distance. Her boots continue all the way down her legs. Sculpting of the calf muscle there looks really nice. And then they have this sort of crosswire stitching towards the top of them. Wouldn't want to be her getting dressed, but I suppose maybe she just comes out of the factory like this and doesn't have to worry about that. Glossy black sheen of the boots, and they are quite tall. But yeah, a really striking figure, obviously. And taking a look at Pod here, he has really nice silver on his body and forearms. Some beautiful copper accents around his neck, I guess, his elbows, and his hair. And yeah, just a lot of great texture and detail work on this. The ridges on the side of the box look very good. The forearms and these little sort of hoses at the elbow. Now, as far as articulation, Pod is also very straightforward in this department. He doesn't seem to have any joint between his head and his body. His arms are the main point of articulation. They swivel at his shoulder and then hinge up and down at the elbow. There doesn't seem to be any articulation around the wrists or any kind of swivel in the forearm. The plastic here is more of like a model kit plastic, so these really small fingers, be careful with, and also be careful with his sort of, I don't know what his like inner arms. For 2B's articulation, her haircut kind of comes in towards the back of her neck, and she doesn't have any hair articulation under there, so there's not a ton of range going back, maybe 30 degrees up from the angle of her arms. But going down, she does a bit better. More like 45 degrees looking down. The elbows are what I think are single hinges with these feathers, a bit past 90 degrees, but not too much because the sleeve does run into the upper arm. And her wrists are standard Figuarts ball hinge wrists. So they go up or down, but they can also swivel around and go in and out. I'm not exactly sure what this upper joint is, but the lower one seems to be a double ball peg, and she gets a really good amount of crunch going forward, past 45 with the arms, and then with the neck added in, she can look almost straight down at the floor. And then going backward, again, really fantastic. A good 45 degrees. And then with the head, she can almost look straight up. That's fantastic. I really like that. Torso. I think there are actually 4 ball joints in this torso, and that's why it's working so incredibly well. And her hips, she can swivel around at really the lower torso joint would be where you'd want to do it. I guess you can do both, the upper and lower torso. Her little ribbon here can swivel. Skirt is in 2 major pieces, and then the front piece has a cut where the costume is split like that. The front piece and back piece are separable on the sides, so you get a little bit of extra range of movement in the hips. And her hips are really deep drop down ball pegs. And this leg, because of the gap in the skirt, goes well over 90 degrees forward. The left leg doesn't have that same gap at the front of the skirt, but because the skirt is very flexible, it actually gets just as much range as the right, although I don't feel like anything is stretching too much when I do this. You do get a gap, obviously, at the side here, but looking at the front of the skirt, nothing seems to be overly stressed to get that left leg up. Then the knees are double hinge, and they only go a little bit past 90 degrees. Would have liked to seen a little bit deeper knee bend. There's still some room in there, but there's something limiting it. As it is, it's about 120 degree bend. And then ankles are sort of swivel hinge combo joints. Her ankles go down really, really well, and then they go up about 45 degrees, honestly. That's pretty good. And then, of course, they have your sort of swivel style pivot, which gets really good range. And one point of articulation that you might be looking for, which is not here, is a toe joint, and that's due to just the particular shoes this character is wearing. T-pose I thought was going to be a problem because of her sleeve, her shoulder poofs, but they did this really awesome bicep joint, which I don't think I've seen before, where it's actually a ball peg going into the shoulder instead of just a straight peg for swivel. So you get the swivel from the ball peg, but you also get a good bit of tilt at the bicep cut, which allows her to bring her arms pretty much straight out to the side. Breaks the arm sculpt a touch, but I think if you work with it, you can probably get these shoulders to go in a little bit. But that's pretty darn cool. I am really pleased with that arm setup. I didn't think she'd be able to do this at all. A really good amount of tilt in the head, in that torso. The two double ball peg joints allow, let's see, how much side tilt? Really pretty good. That's pretty close to 45. For without the drop, on the drop down hip, her leg goes out about that far. And then if you do use the drop down, let's see if it adds anything. Yeah, a good bit. So almost gets 90 degrees up that way and then 90 degrees up this way. And the skirt really stays together pretty well. There's just a little bit of gap starting to show at the seams, but not too bad. And that's almost a complete split with the feet flat on the floor. Let's see some serious ankle pivot and leg articulation. That is her widest stance, which is absurd in a good way. And then the thigh swivel, which I didn't mention before, is really nicely incorporated into the top of her boots. So there is no cut necessary. Very nice. All right, final joint here is these butterfly joints, which are kind of a 3.0 Figuarts style joint. If you're familiar with the latest figures in the Naruto or Dragon Ball lines, you'll know what I mean. Ball peg going down that's connected to a socket that faces this way, and then another ball peg going into that socket. And so you can actually pull the shoulder in and out of the torso a bit. She is able to, with that, get pretty... Oh, here we go. I've pulled the joint out, and I'm just going to show you what it looks like. So there's the ball peg that goes down into the socket in the torso, and then this is covered. The second ball peg goes in this way and is covered by this little sleeve piece. These can be a little bit tricky to reattach if you do this, which is why I don't do it on purpose too often, but okay, we're good. Okay, but point being, with that joint, she can cross her forearms in front of her body, which is fantastic. It does get pretty gappy, but the costume being black actually helps hide gaps, because the shadows that are made in the gaps don't stick out so much from the rest of her outfit. Okay, her little spikes keep getting caught on my gloves, so if I'm handling this figure poorly, that is at least part of the reason why. Comfortably, I can cross her wrists behind her back as well. The articulation here is astounding. Really, I have pretty much no complaints. In fact, I'm pretty impressed by all of it. I think the only piece that is a little bit underwhelming is looking up, but still, like, that plus this kind of soothes that a little bit for me. Maybe a little bit more elbow and knee range, but overall, phenomenal. Phenomenal articulation. I really like that. Overall, I'm very pleased with this 2B figure. I think the articulation's outstanding. She can get the very deep two-handed sword poses, no problem whatsoever with the great shoulder range that they gave her. My only complaints are the size of the wrist joints, which I'm not sure there's anything they could really do about that, but be careful when swapping hands and posing the wrists. This one on her left hand has popped apart at the hinge a couple of times over the course of this video, just due to kind of the thin nature of her design. She is a bit delicate. Here you can see she fits in really nicely with your spiky, leggy, broad-shouldered video game protagonists collection. We have the SH Figuarts Chun-Li here on the left side, and the Figma Samus Aran on the right. And with that, I think I'll leave you until next time. This has been the Art of Action Figures. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.